this episode of Pastor to Pastor, I take the opportunity to talk to a longtime pastor and a good friend of mine, Dr. Don Cashwell. Don is the senior pastor at Pilot Baptist Church in Zebulon, North Carolina. He also serves on the board of directors for ChristCentered Solutions, the ministry I'm involved with. What you'll hear and see is how Don has faithfully served the Lord for almost 50 years. In our conversation, I'm talking to Don about young ministers exiting the seminary and entering their first pastorate, their first ministry. And my question to him is, how are these young pastors and their ministries different today than they were when he began? And also, if he could offer any advice to them, what would it be? Now, before we get to the conversation, I would like to ask a favor. Would you please subscribe to Just Thinking? Just Thinking is an extension of ChristCentered Solutions, and my goal is to help as many followers of Christ as possible. Thanks a lot. Here's the conversation.
All right. Good morning, Don. How are you?
I'm fine, Brother Rod. It's good to see you.
Good to see
Looking
you too.
pretty good too.
Thank you, sir. You too. This is Pastor to Pastor, and you are the pastor of Pilot Baptist Church in Zebulon, North Carolina, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. How long have you been there, Don?
5 years, a little over 5 years, from March. Just a little over, but nevertheless over 5 years.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, Zebulon is on the outskirts of Raleigh, correct?
That is correct.
How long have you been in ministry, Don?
In fact, just added up the years last year. This fall, September, October will be 48 years.
Wow. 48 years.
8 years, yeah.
That's and how many churches have you served in that time?
Probably at least 11, and if you're including the seminary years and all.
Right, and some of those, was it one or two that you were like an associate or on staff? Is that right?
Correct. A couple of those were staff churches, and where I was associate pastor, education, and senior adult pastor.
Okay. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about new ministers, those coming out of seminary and those just getting started. And what I want people to realize that's watching this is that I'm interviewing all the board members for ChristCentered Solutions. And all of you are pastors and you have different areas of experience, all of it in the ministry, but you have some different strengths and gifts there. And I wanted to talk to each board member and let people get to know you that are wondering about ChristCentered Solutions and how we might be able to help them. And so in this conversation today, again, I wanted to talk about young guys coming into the ministry. And so as we do that, we might talk about other things too, but that's kind of what I wanted to focus on. And so with that in mind, Don, what do you think has really changed in your 48 years of ministry that is going to be different for these younger ministers today? Some of the things that it's going to impact them.
For the young ministers coming into the area of pastoring, I think the legitimacy of the personal contact with the people in the pew, so to speak. I don't, unfortunately, I do not see from many of those who are coming out of the seminary, particularly close by, the one that is close to us, that there is that much of a shall I say, desire and or encouragement to make that much personal contact with the people that are in the pews. And consequently, that being a part of it, I do not see that as a good indicator to the contact and the connection that's going to be made in the communities. I for whatever reason, I believe that many that are coming through our seminaries today, at least, and I can't say all of them because I'm only connecting it with the one that we're close to here. There's more an emphasis on church planting, church starting, than there is the going into the current churches and pastoring, loving and caring and shepherding the people that are there and seeking to reach out to the community.
Okay. So when I hear you describe that, it kind of sounds like younger pastors are being trained or coming out with the mentality more of a CEO rather than a shepherd.
That's correct.
Okay. And do you think that's true for most seminaries today?
Unfortunately, I believe it is. Again, speaking primarily based upon the seminary that we're close to here, but not having been that close to others. But if this is a trail marker, so to speak, of what others are doing, I believe that is certainly what others will be doing and leading to, and while that is not in and of itself bad, what it does is it leaves the current church that are established, the established churches, and fortunate or unfortunate, the traditional church, in a bad setting, because where will they find pastors who will love them, care for them, shepherd them like the scriptures call for us to do? If this is the new teaching and the new trail that's being blazed for them out there in the world.
Okay. So the older established, more traditional churches, there's a what you see and what you think is happening or going to happen is that there's going to be a lack of pastors to take those positions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And that again, church planting, I think, is a necessity, because new churches start and grow faster than the traditional church. But there's got to be, and I think the Lord will have His people out there. Don't get me wrong. I think there will be pastors, but I think the churches are going to have to be innovative, and the pastors are going to have to be innovative to carry on in the ministry, in the pastoral and the churches that are already established, because these CEO-minded pastors that come out are not going to want to be a part of a traditional church, because it is difficult in a lot of instances to marry with a mindset that you are the leader, and God's called you to be the leader, and He's called you to lead that church in a traditional church setting. And there's a lot of work that has to be done in that regard, and it is more difficult than I do believe and having started two new works, it is difficult to go into a setting that is traditionally minded, to where you're the leadership is incorporated in a number of people, and whether it's committee-led church, whether it is a deacon-led church, there are understandings of who the leadership is in the hands of, more so than just the pastor.
Right. Yeah, there are some, because you planted a couple of churches. I've also planted a couple of churches. There are some things that are rather attractive about church planting, right?
Yes, yes.
There's no doubt, there's no questioning that whatsoever. And what do you think some of those attractive things were for you?
Well, just that. You did not have, you did not have the your hands strapped or tied based upon a committee or based upon a group uh, that determines over you um, that we give the direction to the church. You don't give the direction. It is you and us, and or you or I, uh,
Right.
you or us. And in the traditional church, most of the time it is you and us, um, rather than, and most of the time it's more us than you. um, but in a church plant, it's usually is led because you are the one who's planted it, and you are seen more as the CEO. You're understood more as that.
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom there.
Correct. Correct.
And
I don't deny that. Um, it's been interesting here at Pilot. Um, we have come in and in these 5 years been able to move the church from perhaps a what I would say a standstill to what is now. um, we're fully staffed. We have a children's minister. We have a youth pastor. We have a music and education minister. Um, Fully staffed and staff-led church. And we have moved from the traditional aspect into the staff-led aspect.
yeah,
And um,
and
that's
staff led is a little, it's different than even an elder led church.
correct. Yes, yes. It is more where you give. It is understood. When it's, I used to wonder, well, why do they call him senior pastor? Now I know, since I are one, and it is that all the burden and the responsibility for each of your staff people come back on you, and so you, while you may be seen by some as the CEO, it is still not that, because it's a team.
Right.
I see it at least as a team effort. My staff is a part of me, and I a part of them, and where they have the free reign, yet they don't have total free reign, but they do have the free reign to do their responsibilities, and we share what that understanding is of their responsibilities, and I take that responsibility to accept their uh, uh, responsibility on me, and so all of it falls back on me. It rises and falls on me, and so the church is able to function and carry out its calling by God to go and make disciples, as we provide that leadership for them from the staff.
Right. But even as a staff led church, going back to what you said earlier about having that connection with the congregation, that personal touch, there's still an expectation on your part in the congregation, or from the congregation, that you are among them.
Correct, correct. It's not that I have my staff and let them do the connection with the areas of ministry they have. I am involved in all of the aspects of the personal touch with the people, from the babies up to the senior adults. The staff is not just out there by themselves, and neither am I. That's what's so good about this aspect is that we share ministry, and each one of them touches others' lives as well, uh, than just their ministry area.
Right.
The children's ministry touches the lives of the adults, parents. I mean, she has to, as well as the senior adults. The youth pastor touches the lives of the children as well as the adults, as well as the youth, and so on with all of us. Yes.
Okay. So with this, again, this young minister coming out of seminary or just Bible college and just starting out, uh, be it a church plant or be it a traditional church, is there some advice that you would give to them as they begin their ministry?
The first thing I would say to them is, in their surrender to the call to ministry, um, you've got to know that you've got that call. One, if you're satisfied that you've got that call, you rest in that call, and then commit yourself to that call, and then commit yourself to being and sacrificing, um, because that's what you've got. That's a part you've got to learn, is that it is a sacrifice. It is a calling. Yes, it is. Some people say you made a choice. Yes, I made a choice, and that choice I made was to follow the Lord's will and to follow the Lord's guidance in the call that He gave to me, that I did not have a choice over. I could choose to be happy in the Lord and follow Him, or I could choose to be miserable in the Lord and not follow Him and His calling upon my life. I chose to follow the Lord, not knowing what that meant. But through these 48 years, I've understood and come to understand that this life of a pastor, this life of a minister, this life of a called into the ministry is a call to sacrifice. Jesus sacrificed, and He is my mentor. He is my chief mentor. He is my lead mentor that sacrificed His life, leaving heaven to come down and give His life for me and everyone. And if I'm not willing to sacrifice whatever it is in my life that I see important, then and which includes everything, uh, then I need to really rethink this thing called the calling of God upon my life. What has God called me to do? But in 48 years, I can say it's been truly the a blessing in my life, and my wife uh, would agree. I think even at this point, after almost 48 years, and might as well say 48 years, because we'll be in we'll be in September and October before you know it. So it's what I'd say is give yourself to it, and then just abide in it, so to speak, learning everything you can, drink up, uh, get get with a senior pastor, get with an older pastor, and let them mentor you, give you some ins and outs, some ideas, some sharing with them on what they've done, how they have learned, what they've come through, some of the things in their lives, and drink from the well of their experience, and let them help you learn the actuality, the practicality of what ministry really is.
Well, and you've from a distance because we were in the same town for a while, but
Hmm.
served as that for me. You're someone that I know I can call and talk things through, and I have before. Did you have someone like that in your early ministry?
Yes, I've had several, and my pastor was one, Brother O.W. Pulley, who's now in glory. He was good. I could go to him. Another Brother W.C. Barham Jr., who was a dear friend and close pastor friend, and I could go to and talk with. And one that I shared with, and both you and I know, and Pastor Bill Sanderson, and he shared. Uh, he would have loved to have poured more into me than I let him, and would have been good. But he helped me a tremendous amount. And Rod, you've been a mentor to me as well. Uh, it's I don't think you have to be an old individual, and when I say old, I don't mean decrepit, but I mean older necessarily. We can learn from each other, and I think you and I have, and our friendship is, I think, is a bond that I enjoy and appreciate what you have gained and what you have learned and what you've been through in your years of ministry as well. Uh, so it's I think you need to share. One of the things that I do see in these new guys coming out of seminary today is the aloneness that they feel confident in, and that's a bad thing. That really is a bad thing. There are no lone rangers in the ministry, and you need to connect with someone, particularly that you can find to share with, because if you are alone and you think you can do it alone, just you and the Lord, God has placed around you other guys that can help you and support you and undergird you, and you can do the same for others. And that's how the Lord would have us to be. And look in the scriptures, as even Jesus, not only did he have the 12, but he had that inner circle, uh, Peter, James, and John. And so he had someone. So use him as a mentor if you would like, and allow him to speak to you. And all of us need to do that, and be a part of that community as well.
Sure. Yeah, the ministry can be quite lonely,
Hmm.
and we do need other pastors around us, other men that know the ins and outs, the who experienced things that we may be going through today or that we will be going through tomorrow.
Hmm.
We need that constant encouragement
Correct.
of another. I don't think people, and that's one of the reasons. What I'm about to say is one of the reasons why I think Christ-Centered Solutions is so important, because one of the areas that I want to serve in is to be a pastor to pastors, particularly younger pastors that are struggling, um, because we get to a point where we feel all alone, even though people are around us all the time.
Yes.
And there's an expectation from our congregations and from the community, and they kind of exalt, or they used to exalt pastors. Now they do everything they can to tear pastors down.
Yeah. Yes.
Not everyone, but the world tends.
Correct.
And we don't want people to think that we're the same kind of sinners that they are, I guess. um, because we believe it hurts our ministry, and sin does hurt our ministry, but that's why we need other guys to
Yes.
hold us accountable.
Hold us accountable. Yeah.
But yeah, there's that fear there.
Hmm.
Others are going to find out about us, and then we lose our ministry. And losing your ministry also means you lose it. The mentality is that we lose everything in life,
Correct.
right? And so one of those things I would, like you would encourage young pastors, all pastors, um, to have others around them that
Correct.
they can confide in.
Correct.
Um, so as we move on with this, let me ask you this, because I kind of bring up ChristCentered Solutions,
Mhm.
the biblical counseling ministry that I'm involved in and that you serve on the board as a board member. Um, what has been during your 48 years? What's been your practice for counseling needs in the church?
Well, I'm. Let me just say I'm particularly uh, fond of and grateful for God's calling upon your life, you and Teresa, uh, going in this ministry direction that God has called you in now, and in this journey of your life and your calling, because I see Christ-centered solutions as a so much needed, particularly in this day and time. We're living in the 21st century, and things are not getting easier. This coronavirus, particularly, is showing us the need for, I think, understanding better biblically, from a biblical standpoint, the biblical um, understanding of who God is, and what God has really laid out for us and showed us in His Word, and shows us in His Word, of what life really is all about, the priorities of life, the uh, the priority of putting Him first, and putting others ahead of ourselves, and and taking care of family and the needs that come to us uh, through children, and every area of family life, and individual, how we handle things, how we cope with things, uh, where are we going, what are we going to do with how we deal with life situations, circumstances, and the perspective that we should have in life. Uh, this coronavirus has brought anxiety, fear, to a tantamount in life, and so many uh, Christians have really um, uh, allowed fear and anxiety to simply foster in them an overwhelming um, scenario of need for them to rest in Christ and rest in the power of the gospel and the peace that only Christ can give. Christ-centered solutions can help tremendously in that area and in so many other areas. And I see that as a vital uh, point and part of our lives, and of a need today. And Christ-centered solution will be meeting that need, and does meet that need even now. uh, Throughout my ministry of 48 years, I've seen it in marriage. I've seen it in family struggles and family troubles. Uh, and how can I be of help as a pastor? Um, and I've come to understand and come to see, and I've had pastoral counseling uh, training, pastoral counseling courses in seminary, but even since then, um, continuing education in counseling and all. And yet, still, I know that I have limitations. I can only do so much, even with my own people in the church family, because I am not a fully trained, and do not have the time to put into counseling folks as they have need. Now, I fully look forward to perhaps a day, if Lord wills, when I would be able to spend time and help Christ-Centered Solutions in that area. But I know right now, if an individual and or couple or a family come to me for counseling needs, as a pastor, there's only so much I can do, because there's only so much time I can give towards that and take away or be a part of the church family. So I have to make myself aware of who it is that I can turn to, where I can refer. And Christ-Centered Solutions is one of those areas that I can lean on to do just that. So I think it's incumbent upon us as pastors to realize our limitations. As Clint Eastwood says, man's got to know his limitations.
That's true. We do need to know our limitations. But that's one of the constant themes that I hear, the repeated theme of time.
Mm-hmm.
Pastors, and being a pastor myself for the last 30 years, and also doing biblical counseling, it is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And pastors tend to limit the time that they devote to counseling to just a few sessions with their congregation, with their or people in their community,
Mm-hmm.
community. And then they kind of run out of steam because so many other people have needs as well.
Correct.
And that is one of the things that we at Christ-Centered Solutions want to help pastors with. I say we because I mentioned to you and that we have a young lady coming on to be a part of our ministry named Valerie Ceron. And Valerie was actually a member here at Friendship in North Charleston. And she and her husband moved to Mexico, and she's back and forth now between Mexico and North Carolina. Or, well, her mom lives in North Carolina, but here in the Carolinas, I should say. And but she finished her degree, her master's at Liberty, and so she's going to be helping us some.
Good.
But and that's important too, because oftentimes I would say the majority of the time that when someone walks through our door for counseling, it's not the husband, it's the
It's the wife, yeah.
And we need good female counselors,
Mm-hmm.
biblical counselors to work with them. And Jay Adams, in his book Competent to Counsel, which I think he wrote that back in the mid 60s, maybe early 70s. His view was that Christians are competent to counsel because they have the Word of God.
Yeah.
Says to me, every biblical counselor is someone who should know the Word, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where we find our guiding principles and how we can best help people. So, one other question here, Don, on the counseling aspect. If you were a young pastor today and needing help from a biblical counselor, and you saw CCS or Christ-Centered Solutions, what do you think you might ask about Christ-Centered Solutions?
One of the, I think the most important aspect for me would be, are you biblical? Or do you use the culture of today and or the idea and philosophy of our modern day professors in psychology and psychiatry to do your counseling? What do you major on? What is your foundation for um, uh, uh, being a biblical counselor? And probably first and foremost, I would ask you to share your testimony with me. What
Okay.
does Jesus mean to you, and who is Jesus to you? And then going from there is how do you intersect Christ from your life into the life of the person who comes and needs the counseling.
Okay. Yeah, those are good questions. The testimony might take a few minutes, but but I want to encourage anyone who watches this that my testimony is on my YouTube page and also on ChristCentered Solutions website, where you can download it to use it for Sunday school classes or um, other groups that you might have meeting. But I like your questions, and I would hope that our name would give it away.
Mm-hmm.
Christ is first and foremost. He is centered in this counseling, and that it is biblical. We take everything back to the scriptures.
Amen.
From our view of God to our view of man. That's where we get our information from. It doesn't mean that we don't integrate other thoughts and studies.
Sure.
We want to stay up to date
Mm-hmm.
on things that are taking place and ideas that others have, and we read research and those type of things. But we always come back to the scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when we talk about worldviews, and that's basically what you were saying. Our world was a biblical worldview,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would want to reassure any pastor that's looking at us as a ministry that might help support them in the things that they're doing in their church, that it comes back to the Bible.
Correct. Good.
All right, Don. I really appreciate your time today, and hopefully some young ministers might watch this. It might the first part might make a few of them mad if they're church planners with the CEO mentality, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We don't mean to make people mad, but sometimes that happens.
Yeah. Well, sometimes as someone has said, sometimes you got to get mad to get glad, and you've got to find out. You've got to get somebody lost before you can get them found.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? And if that helps them to come to an understanding and to seek others out, and to work with others, not be a lone ranger, not try to be a lone ranger, and to try to learn, then well and good. If not, then okay, um, suck it up, go home, and come back. We'll be here.
Yeah, I had a professor at Piedmont years ago that said if you wanted to be a good preacher, when you go into the pulpit, you've got to be sad, glad, or mad. I'm not so sure about the mad part in the pulpit. That may not be the best thing for a preacher to go into the pulpit with.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I think I have fulfilled all of that parameters in, but at some point in time.
Well, I know I have. And a couple of them I regret.
Yes, you and me both.
Anyway, well, thanks for the time today, Brother Don.
My privilege.
I love you, and I appreciate your ministry, and thank you for taking time to do this today.